Hello, BookTube. I'm here with, well, it's June on the Range, but it's with a book to film, and that is True Grit, that was published in 1968 by Charles Portis, and the 1969 Henry Hathaway film starring John Wayne, Glenn Campbell, Kim Darby, and others, obviously. And then I've also watched the 2010 film with Jeff Bridges and directed by the Coen brothers. We'll start with the book. It's a very, very simple plot, or well, I should say deceptively simple. It's a story of a young girl. It's told from her point of view, in retrospect, as about 25 or so years later. And she's 14 years old, where the plot and the action takes place. Her father is killed by a hired hand called Tom Chaney, and she wants justice and revenge on him. So she hires a U.S. Deputy Marshal, Reuben Rooster Cogburn, and heads out to modern day Oklahoma, the Indian country, and it's set there. Everything starts in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And she's from, like she keeps saying, from Dardanelle in Yale County, which is just sort of, I guess it would be upriver, I think, from where Fort Smith is, along the Arkansas River, which is a tributary of the Mississippi. And they get joined by a Texas Ranger named, he calls himself Le Beef, which is kind of interesting because Texas... what are they renowned for? Beef. But it's a French name, Le Boeuf, but he pronounces it Le Beef. She doesn't really want him along. He has his own interests because the Tom Chaney that she knows also killed a minor senator from Texas, and he's after the reward there for that. And but she forces herself along with this. So they go through many adventures, sort of, to a certain extent, through the Indian country, and they do finally get. I'll talk more about the end in a bit and the differences to the films. With that, but that's sort of the basic plot. But I think there's a lot more to it. There's an introduction by Donna Tartt here, and I'm glad I found this because I started reading this on ebook because I couldn't find my copy. Yes, I do lose things around here, but I did find it. It's an interesting introduction, but she, I think, but she doesn't deal with something I think is very, very important in the book. A few things. Now, I could be reading too much into it, but I don't think so. She likens the character Maddie Ross to Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, definitely. However, there's a lot more to it. It's set, they don't give a year, but they do say that it's, there's a few hints because it ends in 1903, and that's sort of like 25 years later, so it's 1878. And they also, to back that up, is the president, at the time they mentioned the president is Reuben Hayes, which was president of the U.S. from 1877 to 1891. 1877, I think, is a very, very important date in this. So it's 1 year after the action has taken place, around 1878-ish. Now, that sort of officially ended the Reconstruction after the Civil War, which then ushers in a new era, a new country, like, coming together. I think that's what it's sort of, that's why it's there. And there is this new West, where by this time, for the most part, the so-called Indian problem, and I use that in quotation marks, has been pushed aside a little bit, and they've been pushed onto the reservation in the Indian country, in modern-day Oklahoma. So there's more West, like, in the West, there's more towns starting up, and you see this, where so-called civilization has come to the West, because in Fort Smith, there is Judge Parker, which was based on a real judge, and Rooster Cogburn is a marshal that is bringing in bad guys. He sort of represents the Old West, and there's a lot more that's representing this, and the judge does as well. But because there's sort of justice and law, and what comes along, for good or bad, sort of with civilization, are lawyers. And this is permeated with lawyers. There's a whole court scene where Maddie is watching Rooster Cogburn give evidence, and there's a transcript in the book. And they're trying to, finagle and say, well, obviously Rooster is not following legal ways fully, because he'd prefer to sort of shoot and kill the bad guys, and the judge is sort of, it doesn't really say so much, but he sort of is of the same understanding. And but there's lawyers trying to twist and saying that he's doing this wrong, and so there's legal stuff coming in now, and that sort of is, I think, part of the new West that is coming in. And Maddie sort of is part of this too. She's sort of the strong sort of pioneer woman that was in the sort of history and mythology and the legend of the West. And she's resourceful, smart. She doesn't, she'll hold herself in a man's world, in a sense. But also, let's move back from that too, another layer. This was written in 1968, or published in 1968. What was happening? There was the women's movement was gaining things, so that fits in as well. But it doesn't hit you over the head. Her character fits in with the modern woman of the 60s. If you want to go into all these things, birth control and all this kind of stuff, and it's there, and it's a reflection. Even though this is happening in 1878, the story, but it's a reflection. Her character is a reflection on, because she's female, on 1878 to 1968. And it's a reflection there, and it's sometimes this is done, and it's done badly. Like, they just sort of really poke at it, and hold up signs. Look what I'm doing here. Look what I'm doing here. It's a little more subtle than that, because her character is believable. She she basically bullies a Captain Stonehill, or no, Colonel Stonehill, who is a trades good. He trades in sort of feed and this kind of thing, but he also runs a livery stable, and she sort of bullies him into giving her money. And this is the thing too, is if this was the Old West and her saying, well, I'm going to get Lawyer Daggett on you and do all this, and she finagles to get the best money out of him for allowing her father's horse to be stolen, and it was his responsibility, and also to buy back the other ponies that he was buying. And if this was the Old West, he would have told her, just get out of here. But now, with the law coming in, this is the New West, things are this way, he backs off because he knows this will happen. But in the Old West, it never happened. So it's another example of the New West. But also, too, he's a very interesting character, which I can understand why they don't deal with it in the films, because he sort of is. He's very a sympathetic character, because there's a few interactions there, even though she's almost feels a little guilty, I think, of bullying him into this, because he's sort of going, well, I've come out here, to do this. Everybody said this place was going to be like a new Chicago. It's not working out for him. He has recurring bouts of malaria. So he doesn't have that great of a life, but it's sort of, the promise that he was told, like the promise of the new world, the new life, the new West, may not be happening quite as he, well, at least the way he had hoped. And that might be, it's another layer and another reflection, even though it's the New West, things might not be turning out as great as people had hoped. I think that's all in there. And another thing is, while I was reading the book, was there's a lot of information about guns in here. Usually they're sort of mentioned, but there's a little more. Like this Cheney has a black powder mark on his face where a shell went off or a gun went off, and the black powder went into his skin and it stained his skin. And there's lots of talk about black powder, which was, before smokeless powder, I think 1890s, when shells came in, that there'd be black. So that, again, is that sort of the Old West? And also, too, she's got a Colt Dragoon gun, like a big gun that it was sort of one of the first guns that were made that you didn't, that there were repeaters. That you could have 6 shells in there, or six shots, and rather than sort of muzzle loading, but still with black powder. And this is a little different because it's an older model where you've got the ball and you've got precision caps that you make up, and you create the caps that you put it in, and it has to be done all correctly. And that's explored in there. Because, Rooster Cogburn is talking, well, you don't know how to do this, but it turns out that he screws up, filling the precision caps, and it makes the gun misfire. But also Rooster Cogburn has a couple Navy Colts that are probably Dragoons as well, that are a ball and cap. And it's also a different and interesting gun where the cylinder, you could take the cylinder out and put a new cylinder in, and rather than putting bullets in. He also has the newer, and they don't really quite say in the book whether it's I'm assuming it's a 45 that he carries in his holster. The Navy Dragoons are in his saddle sort of holsters, that he carries 2 of them. And the reason why I say that I think he's got a 45, the newer 45, the ones, with a bullet, with a shell casing and everything, is because when in one scene when they're waiting for Ned Pepper, who is another bad guy in this, they're waiting for him at a dugout. She sees him pull a sack of shells out, and he loads his Winchester, which again is probably going to be like a Winchester 73 or something, because this is the 70s, so it's a newer type of gun. So he's got new stuff, so he's straddling the old and the new with technology as well. I might be reading a little too much into this, but I found it fascinating because the way there's a reason why Portis is talking so much about guns at times. So I think, and it's not just because it's in the psyche and of the West. There's a little more to this. But anyway, she's watching him put bullets into the Winchester, and then he takes his revolver and puts the same bullets in, and she makes a remark, oh, she thought there'd be different bullets. So it makes me think that it's probably a 45 that he has, and which could also shoot 44, because the Winchester would have been 44 caliber. So as far as I remember of things, that a 45 at that time could shoot 44 calibers. Or it could have been a 44 caliber Colt, but it's not really said. But it's just, if it was, she might have known, and there'd be no sense saying this, saying that she thought it would be different bullets. But that's debatable. And then we've got LeBeef, that has an old Sharps carbine, like high caliber. Large caliber, probably a 54 caliber one, and it's breech loading as well, meaning at the back rather than muzzle loading, and it's a cap and ball as well. So you've got the ball, you got the lead part, and then you've got this precision cap that's doing it, and it's a single shot. Now, there's Rooster Cogburn talks about, like, we're going to be safe with that, because if we run up to elephants and buffalo, we're okay. Because they were used as for bison, the buffalo, but also sharpshooting. At the time they were one of the best, and could shoot accurately the furthest. So LeBeef has this, and he also has two shining new, Colts, probably 45s, but also too, mentioning the bison, the buffalo. Rooster Cogburn laments a little bit, like, cause he tells Maddie a little bit about what he used to do when they're waiting for Lucky Ned Pepper at the dugout overnight, and he starts talking about his life a little bit. We'll get to a little more about that, but he did, one time he did go out and shoot buffalo, and he sort of laments the fact that there's no buffalo anymore, the bison, and he says he'd love to have a pickled tongue. He'd pay $3, I think, or something like that, for pickled tongue of a bison. And there's all sorts of things in there, because, like, when he wants to trade the Dragoon for Maddie for it's a little Dillinger. He calls it a pepper box, because it was like it had multiple it could shoot actually four, I think it was 5 at that time. It could shoot 5 bullets at the same time, but it's sort of for women's protection. A lot of times it was used, but it's a specific one, and it's probably lower caliber, like 22. She wants her, her Colt Dragoon. It's a sort of bond with her, between her and her father, because it was her father's gun. Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting, and also too, they keep mentioning that Tom Chaney has a Henry rifle, which is a repeater too. It's a lever action, like a little thing at the bottom that you eject, and you put it. The ejects the it actually puts in the bullet into the breech, and then you once it's shot, you eject the shell. And that was one of the first repeater rifles that was actually used heavily, I believe, in the Civil War. And then later, an improvement on that was the Winchester rifle. And there were so many different Winchesters, and the biggest one is sort of is called, like, it's won the West, is the Winchester 73, 1873. And there's even a fabulous film with James Stewart called Winchester 73, but that's another matter. But yeah, so there's all this stuff in there, and I think it harkens back to the old and the new, the technology, the gun culture as well. But I think it's the way he describes the guns. That's what's different in this book than a lot. So there's multi-levels because he's also writing sort of a feminist in some ways, but very subtly, of 1960s sort of, almost flower culture as well in the book, but reflecting it back to 1878, but also to the old West coming in with the new. She's sort of, the proud and, stern, pioneer sort of young woman. Anyway, so let's go to the films now. Like, there's the 1968 or 69 film with John Wayne as Rooster Cogburn. It was directed by Henry Hathaway. Henry Hathaway, to me, is one of three of the biggie. There's a trio of, to me, are classic Western directors. And we've got, I think at the top would be, or the top two definitely is John Ford and Howard Hawks, and then there's Henry Hathaway. Now, John Ford, all of them started in silent films. John Ford made a ton of Westerns in silent. Howard Hawks, a little bit, but he started making more in the 30s, and sort of the same with Henry Hathaway, more in the 30s. But they had their basis in learning in silent films. That's the key. There's a fourth one, but he didn't have his character, his basis in silent film, is Bud Bodecker, which he made a lot of budget Westerns, but they are really good with Randolph Scott and that. So anyway, so we got Henry Hathaway doing this, and the I made some notes here. Marguerite Roberts wrote the screenplay. Beautiful screenplay. She pulls out so much dialogue from this book, but also adds to it, because in the book, Maddie Ross keeps quoting sort of scripture, so she's pious. There's a lot of scripture that's being done here, so she's sort of God-fearing and all this stuff, but also sort of being a modern, in a sense, modern woman as well. And there's many actors in there. Kim Darby plays Maddie Ross. She's too old for the part, clearly. She's 21. She had a child at the time. But she does extremely well. John Wayne and her didn't get along very well. He didn't really care for her. But he complained that she never knew her lines when she came on set. But they work together really, really well. And when she does do the filming, she does these parts really well. And she does Maddie Ross extremely well for the book, even though she is too old for the part. John Wayne is too old for the part because he's like 60, 61 when this was being filmed. And Rooster Cogburn is in his mid-40s. Glenn Campbell plays LaBeef. Well, obviously, there's things that have to be done. You have to put, a lot of times at that time was a singer, a rock star, entertainer in roles. And Glenn Campbell just really couldn't act his way out of a wet paper bag very often. But he's okay with it. They were actually going to have Elvis. Elvis would have been too over the top, obviously. But even though Glenn Campbell was popular at this time with Wichita Lineman and other songs, Mia Farrow was actually thought of for doing Maddie Ross, and she was at the same time instead of this, she did Rosemary's Baby with Roman Polanski. I wouldn't have believed Mia Farrow's a really good actress, but I wouldn't have believed her as Maddie Ross, so that was sort of good. And there's other older actors in there that have bit parts. Hank Warden is the Undertaker, and he's in he was Mose Harper in Searchers, and all the way through. He was one of the big cadres of the actors that John Ford had set up. and there's, you know, the lawyer Daggett is always brought up. She's like, you know, in the book and in here, she's always, as Glenn Campbell saying, she spouts him off like pulling a gun, you know, and that's her gun. Is rather than using force, the gun. See, this is the thing. It's changing to, you have a lawyer. The courtroom is the gun instead of an actual gun, obviously. But the lawyer Daggett is John Fiedler. And there's an interesting thing. I keep trying to, I not keep trying, but I a lot of times make a Star Trek connection. Kim Darby and John Fiedler were in Star Trek episodes, and I forgot to mention in Searchers, Jeffrey Hunter was in the Star Trek, well, The Cage. He was Captain Pike. But there's some other great actors. This Colonel Stonehill. Fabulous actor, Strother Martin. He's mostly known, people sort of know. If you don't know him, pull up Strother Martin, Cool Hand Luke, and you'll see his little speech in there. We have a failure to communicate. That even doesn't come close to it. But if you're interested, pull it up. The guy, I forgot to write down, I've seen him a lot of stuff, who played Tom Chaney. And he's too tall for the character, but that's fine. But it's an interesting character, as in the book, it says, oh, I never get a break, sort of. It's always against me. He's always, everything is not his fault. It's something else. He's killed somebody. Well, it's not my fault. Everything was against me. And it's sort of a little bit like the Colonel Stonehill, a little bit character, but not as bad. Because at least the Colonel Stonehill knows the situation, what he's done. Tom Chaney is sort of, you know, he blames everybody else. It was like I say, the action is set in Arkansas and the Indian country, or Oklahoma, but it was filmed in Colorado on the San Juan Mountains. Yeah, and the interesting thing is that Rooster Cogburn had a mustache in the book, and John Wayne refused to this, and he didn't like the eye patch, and he wore the eye patch over his left eye. Also the same eye that John Ford did. But that is in the book. It is his left eye. But the interesting thing is he had eye patches so he could see through, so he could do this. But it's amazing what he does with that one eye. And the way he cocks his head and does stuff like that. It's amazing. John Wayne was never, you know, he's not a Shakespearean actor in any way. But he had a presence. He had, you know, he was bigger than stardom in many ways. And he won an Oscar for this, and it was the only Oscar, I think, that he won. And I can see why. He did really well with it. Yeah, I guess, yeah, Glenn Campbell wasn't that good. But there's some really fabulous lines that are from the book and added to the films and to the film, because it's like, you know, like there's a rat in the place, and Rooster shoots it. In the book, he shoots the rat with the dragoon, and that's why they used up bullets that he has to replenish and reload, and that's where he screws up. That's not in the book. He pulls out his own revolver and he shoots, but it's a rat writ for a rat, you know, and it's just fabulous. And there's another one, the saying, you know, she asks, "Are you game for this?" And he goes, "I was born game, and I intend to go out that way." It's just, you know, there's some great lines. And then when she, you know, they try to get rid of her, and she takes the horse and swims across the river, and the thing, and he goes, "She reminds me of me." And then when they're in the dugout with Quincy and Moon gets shot in the leg, and Moon is Dennis Hopper. which is kind of interesting. Young Dennis Hopper. About the same time, he did Easy Rider as well. But the Quincy, like, you know, Rooster's asking him, you know, have you seen Lucky Ned Pepper? And, you know, he's called Lucky Ned Pepper because he gets out of, he hasn't been killed yet. And it's very, very interesting. Because while there's the line there, he says, you know, he's got, you know, he's got a messed up lower lip. I shot him in the lip. And the guy says, what were you aiming at? And he goes, the upper lip. That's not in the book, but it's just a beautiful line. And then at the near the end, when they have the shootout, because he talks about, you know, him doing that before he, in the book, he takes the reins in his hands and he pulls the two dragoons out. And, you know, but just before he says, you know, fill your hand, you son of a bitch, and starts riding and starts shooting. And there's a lot of dialogue there from the book that's in this film. Yeah, and it's just there's so many great lines there. Robert Duvall played Lucky Ned Pepper, and he did extremely well. But there's a few things that are, you know, cinematic boo-boos, I guess you would say. Like, you know, he definitely, like, Rooster Cogburn definitely has a Winchester, but he's got one with a large hoop on it. That's the lever action, and that's a Winchester 94 from 1894. It has a big hoop, and you've seen it in other films too. But sometimes it's out of the wrong place. It may have been made for, you know, people with gloves, like, you know, if you're in a cold or trapper or something like that. But it also allows John Wayne to do the cinematic thing, and he did that in Stagecoach too. That he can flip the gun around and cock it, you know. And in this film, for the cinematic thing, instead of pulling out the two Navy Colts, he puts the rein in his mouth, and he's got one the revolver in one hand and the Winchester in the other. The other thing that's wrong too is, and it was mentioned actually on the I was sort of noticing it, that it was wrong on the film. It was mentioned in the commentary. The saddles are wrong. You know, the saddles are flat at the back. That's sort of, you know, the typical saddles that were being used and rid, or had the people rode. That's right. At the time the film was making, but in the West, it had a sort of a raised back to it, you know, there's things like that, and they change up a few things, but to me, the original is an extremely accurate portrayal of the book, except the book is centered around Maddie Ross, her sort of coming of age, you know, and she sees these horrors, you know, by doing this, and she shoots actually Tom Chaney as well. What else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, in the book it's about her, but in the film, because it's John Wayne, the film sort of becomes about him. You know, and that's a little, you know, it's a difference. But the thing is, if you're going to have John Wayne in the film, that's going to happen. Now, the film ends with her. Well, it works out that she falls into the snake pit with rattlers. She gets bit. She's got a broken arm, and Rooster saves her, but also too with help of LaBeef, who then dies because he's been hit on the head by a rock by Tom Chaney, and then Rooster Cogburn takes her on her horse, and it sort of dies because but there's no other horse there, so he forces it to run and run, and he saves her in the film, and then he takes her home, and then she says, shows him the family plot, gravestone of her father, and says, when you die, you can have a place here. And then that's where it ends, sort of, with John Wayne sort of jumping over a fence on the horse, and that's where the film ends. The book is very different because she shoots Tom Chaney at a river, and then she's left with him, like in the film too, while Lucky Ned Pepper leaves with his gang, and then gets the shootout a few moments later in a little meadow with Rooster. But she goes to she shoots again, and the gun, and she gets sort of blown back into the pit where the rattlesnakes are. She breaks her arm. She's sort of in another little hole, but she's sort of stuck there, and she's going to fall even further, but she sees a shirt, so she starts pulling it, but what it is the skeleton, and this is December as well, in the book. It's December, and there's sort of a whole ball of, young rattlesnakes and everything too, and she disturbs them, and they're coming out of their hibernation. They're still a bit, sluggish, but, there's a small one that bites her on the hand. And in the meantime, after Rooster, he does this. He pulls the Dragoons or the Navy Colts, and he shoots his way out. LaBeef actually kills Lucky Ned Pepper with a long shot with his Sharps rifle. But then Tom Chaney hits him overhead with a rock, and this is before Maddie goes into the hole. But she thinks he's probably dead, Rooster comes back, finds her in the hole, sort of goes down to get her out, but he kills some of the snakes. In the meantime, he shot Tom Chaney, and he falls in, and it's a very graphic scene. There's a lot more about the snakes, and the snakes biting him on the face, and then there's ones that are crawling over her face, as well, in her neck and her arm. That wouldn't have worked to TV. In the film in 1969. So anyway, LaBeef helps them out, so he's not dead, and he doesn't die in the book. He rides. Rooster rides with Maddie to save her. And leaves him there, who he eventually gets the body out of the hole, and eventually, as far as they know, takes him back to Texas, gets a reward and everything, and he sort of disappears from the picture. And in the book, she ends the book and saying she believes this is what's happened, but she has no other information. But anyway, Rooster saves her. But it turns out, and then he sort of disappears a little bit. And they have to amputate her arm because she's taken so long to get to the place, to any medical help where she was bitten, that arm. Her broken arm gets fixed, but Rooster doesn't take her home. She goes home, and this is all in retrospect. And Lawyer Daggett sort of, was gonna, confronted, apparently, Rooster, saying he's gonna sue and everything like that, and he put her in danger. But then he goes and apologizes and gives them the rest of the money. She keeps track. She hears things about Rooster, that at some point Rooster is sort of drummed out of the U.S. Marshals, and he actually went and fought in the Johnson County War, which was 1880 something to 1893. in Wyoming, but he was on the rancher side, and this was a sort of a range war that the actually homesteaders won in real life. But he's there, so he was on the wrong side, and well, for him, I guess it was the right side. And then he winds up joining a Wild West show, and she refers to Wild West show before because she sees something earlier, and this is again how it's a reflection of the old and the new. That she thinks is from a Wild West show, but it's sort of, harkening back to the Old West. But this is the younger sort of James Wild West show. He joins Cole Younger. He talked about him a little bit, and there really was a Wild West show that they did, aging, and also too, you learn about the character that he rode with Quantrell's Raiders, during the Civil War. And all this information of what's past comes out that night that they're waiting for Lucky Ned Pepper at the dugout, and he tells her the story of all this, of what happened, and not too much about the Quantrell, but he talks about being a drover, doing all this shooting buffalo, and also robbing a bank in that, but he's convinced that he didn't do anybody harm. He robbed an institution, so it's not. And then she says, "Well, it's still stealing." And he goes, "Well, that's what the Mexican authorities thought too, or New Mexico, I think it was, or Texas, wherever." But it's his moral sort of stance that if you rob from an institution, a bank, it's not really stealing, And he talks about, being hooked up with Potter, who was his previous partner who got killed. But anyway, yeah, so you get all this stuff, and it's all sort of harkening back to the old and the new. And I just found it really good because, as I say, the layers, it's deceptively simple. There's a lot more happening there. Now, I'm really running late here, but now I also watched the 2010 film, True Grit. It's directed by the Coen brothers, Ethan, and I can't remember his other name, but anyway, Jeff Bridges. I do love Jeff Bridges as an actor. He did well in this. I don't know why they changed the eye patch to the right side, because while he's firing, it's as if he's aiming with his right eye, which he's got the patch over it. So I didn't quite understand that. But they rectified the Winchester. They rectified that. It's a correct sort of. I don't know the exact model. I'm not that up on it, but I've learned before a little bit about guns and gun history for the West. But it's definitely not a the Winchester 94 model. That's for sure. The saddles are correct, and instead of filming in Colorado, they filmed in New Mexico for this film. Maddie is about the actress for Maddie is about the right age, but I didn't really care for her. She's not a bad actress, but she just didn't quite work. Maddie was in the book even was very, determined in this, and for this actress, you could tell she's acting. You can see the acting, and it's as if there's a smarty pants smile inside her all the time. It didn't work. And Matt Damon as LaBeef, just as bad as Glenn Campbell. It didn't work. The guy that did Cheney was okay, but they didn't get into the character of saying, it's, everything happens to me. It's I never get a clean break type thing. That wasn't there. But the guy, and this is the thing, Robert Duvall is great as Lucky Ned Pepper, but he's not on the screen that long. And even the guy on here, as Barry Pepper, is the actor's name. I've never heard of him before. I've never seen him, but he was excellent as Lucky Ned Pepper. I think he was the best of a lot that sort of worked. Jeff Bridges, as I say, works, but there's things in here that just nonsensical. Like the Coen brothers did the script, so they, you could hear hearkening of of the script from Marguerite Roberts, but is it really, or is it they just went back to the book? They definitely went back to the book with court stuff, and they put more court banter back and forth. But it's like, a few things of he's saying, what direction were you going when you're backing up? And it's like, when you were backing up, and Rooster says, well, I usually go backwards when I back up. And these are stupid sort of lawyer questions, and that sort of works as well. Like I say, there are some good things with this, and they made Maddie look a little better, because from the first edition of the book, you got Maddie standing there with a rifle and the horses to the side, and she's got braids down, and that's how, she looks the part better. The actress looks the part better. But I didn't quite believe it. But there's other silly things. LaBeef leaves for a while, and they're riding on, and they see someone hanging in a tree that's been there's been a hanging there, and they cut him down. I don't know what this is, and somebody else comes along and they just take the body off. What the hell is this? And then they go along and they think LaBeef is following them, but it's like some mountain guy that's with a bear skin over him and a bear head. I just don't know where this stuff came from. So he disappears. LaBeef is not with them when they go to the dugout, and this is a huge departure from the book and the dynamic between the characters, because in the book and the film, LaBeef is at the dugout and he is sitting up too, and he shoots the horse out of Lucky Ned Pepper, and but he misses Lucky Ned Pepper. And Rooster blames him, saying that he was falling asleep because, but he's saying that, he thought it had started because Lucky Ned Pepper shot, his gun. So anyway, but in the new film, it's just, it's Cogburn and Maddie, that are there. And then all of a sudden, as they're waiting, LaBeef comes up, and then all of a sudden, like minutes later, Lucky Ned Pepper and his gang come, and they sort of lasso him and start pulling him on the ground, and and then at that point, Rooster opens up and fires. He kills a few and probably shoots LaBeef in the shoulder, and the bullet goes right through. And then LaBeef at the same time is bit off his own tongue almost. I don't know where this stuff comes from. And then it's like, he's got this bullet wound through his shoulder, and he's got a tongue that, the tongue, when you bite your tongue, the bleeding doesn't really stop that easy. But anyway, this is sort of cinematic stuff. So, I can sort of let that kind of by. But I always hate this when people get shot, and it's like, a little while later, like he's in a sling a little bit, and there's some blood on the bandaging and stuff. But then when we see him later again after, because they're disbanding, he's saying, and this is the 2010 movie again, Cheney is already dead or whatever. I'm going back to Texas. And then Rooster is going to go back too. And then at that point, that's where, she first finds Cheney at the creek and shoots him. And then so everything sort of comes back. But the thing is, like, I don't know where this stuff comes. And then when we see him again, this is like a day after, maybe 2 days after getting shot. There's no sling and his arm's moving perfectly. I don't get it. But anyway, that's cinematic stuff. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, they do change things for films, and they definitely do that, and they always have done that. But it's just, it bugs me where you've got such a good template in the book. Why do you mess with it? Is it because they wanted to do something different than the original film and just not make a repeat of it? Possibly, but then even why do it? Because I think it's a poor copy of the original story to begin with and the original film. Jeff Bridges is definitely a better actor in all round than John Wayne, but John Wayne has a different presence. He's got an aura, a gravitas about him that he had. it's hard to say. I was talking to Steve Donoghue about this too, and he talks about a magic, and that's a good enough word. There's some actors that, you know, they don't. It's not the acting so much, whether it's good or not, but they've got a magic to them, and I think that's as good as anything to explain it. It was an enjoyable film. If I just not seen anything else and read the book and everything like that and followed it through, I would have been happy with this, you know, at the film. But because I'm comparing it to the original book, I do have problems with, and I don't know why they put these other things. See, these things are put in, and there's no legitimate reason for these, like the hanging thing and them splitting up. It destroys what was doing in the book, you see. But you know, they're not going to get into the Old West and the New West really so much with this in the film, and I expect that, because usually with the film they just skim off the top the action and they play it. See, this book just has the action and stuff like that, but I'm convinced there's layers to it. There's layers to it that you know, are changed in the original film too, because as I say, the dynamic has changed from being the book about Mattie Ross to being this about Rooster Cogburn, and they really changed the ending for the original film. And in the new one, I do you know, pat him on the back of saying that they brought back the original ending to a certain extent. That was good and that works, but it also changes the type of film as well. It no longer becomes a cinematic, and definitely not a John Wayne film, you know, because, you know, it's like, you know, and again, as I was talking with the searchers, by having John Wayne, it gives a different level, a different layer to the film and how people watch it and the meaning of it, because of the actor at times, and John Wayne was one of those, and that's the magic. So that changed it. If it wouldn't have worked with the real ending with John Wayne. It wouldn't have worked as a film. And the other thing is too, there's a neat scene that they brought back in the new film, which works because they've done this, but they would never have been able to do this, I don't think, because again, John Wayne. There's two scenes in the book and in the film where they go up to this sort of trading spot, and there's some kids or young teenagers you know, torturing basically a donkey, and you know, Rooster Cogburn doesn't really say much. He cuts the donkey loose and kicks these kids off, you know, and literally kicks them around, you know, because he didn't like the fact that the animal was being tortured in a sense. So it's showing something of the character, and that works out for another scene where he's riding with Mattie on her horse, which is a small pony, and it's too much for the pony, and it's going to die. And in the book, he takes out his knife and he cuts its withers, like on its shoulder, and he cuts it open to get it, you know, for the pain, to get the animal to go further. A brutal scene. And you could not have done that with John Wayne. Like, nobody would have really accepted that, I don't think, for John Wayne to do that. But because they show it in the book the way it is, and in the new film, the way, you know, he cares about the animal, but he cares about Mattie a lot more. So he does this, and then, you know, they don't go as far in the film as where he takes salt out and rubs salt in the wound as well to get the horse to go even further, you know, before it dies. But, you know, that is actually pretty good, and it's showing sort of brutality, but it's also showing another layer to Rooster Cogburn's character. But anyway, I've gone now, I'm coming up to 55 minutes. This has been a great, I never read the book before, and I didn't know what to expect. I just wanted to say too, is the interesting thing is, like, the Rooster Cogburn fights in the Johnson County War in Wyoming, and that's sort of the setting for Shane, another book that a lot of people have read, and I did that as a book to film too. Film, great. Book, not so good. But yeah, it's very good. And the interesting thing is the music in both are good. I didn't actually look up this, but it seems like in this version they're using the what is it, Ashkelon Farewell, I think, or if it's not Ashkelon Farewell, it's a very lamenting tune, and I don't know when it was written. I don't know if it was written sort of specifically for the Civil War, Ken Burns Civil War series. That's where it's really in. That's where I first learned about it. Or it's an old tune. Regardless, it's a very lamenting, very good, and it works extremely well as music in here. Like I say, I'm not all down about this film. There's so many things that I like about it, but there's also equally so many things I dislike about it. You know, and if, you know, hands down to me, the best one is the Henry Hathaway, you know, 1969 version, you know, and as, you know, as bad as Glenn Campbell's acting is. But John Wayne really works well for this. For the Searchers, I love them in the Searchers as well as for Ethan. But when I read the book The Searchers, I could not picture John Wayne in the character of Amos / Ethan. When I was, and I didn't mention this, when I did read The Searchers, I was picturing Sam Elliott for some reason. But in this one, reading, all I could picture was John Wayne for this. You know, and as I say, you know, Jeff Bridges does a great character, and if there was no John Wayne, I would say, yeah, he works really well. I don't know why the right eye, and it just didn't quite work. Oh well, you know, and yeah. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've read the book. I know a lot of my colleagues have read it. Now I'm going to go look at their videos and see what they thought of the book, because I didn't want to have that tainted, sort of. And yeah, this one doesn't. It's got some extras, but not much. This one has an okay commentary. There's things in there that they should have. You know, if you're going to do a commentary on things and you're going to make points of things, look it up, or, you know, do a bit of research first. There, you know, the good thing was with the saddle, I didn't have to look that up because I thought it was something wrong, and it was mentioned there, and I go, yeah, that is right. I was right with that. But there's other things in here, like they talk about, they don't know what the shooting script was. They don't know when was shot first and what last. And then they're saying that everything was outdoors. There's a scene in here with the dugout where they're inside the dugout and they're looking outside. And the one person's saying, oh, that's on location and that's looking out. And the other guy says, no, it's a matte picture. And they sort of arguing about that. And I said, well, just, you know, all you gotta is open your eyes, because when Glenn Campbell walks out, you can see the shadow of him sort of bend and go up onto the matte painting. So it's not outside; it's a painting, but it looks really good. So, and there's other things like that, like they didn't know what, you know, the derivation of certain words were and stuff like that that are being used, and they're reused in the new film. It's, you know, there was some good stuff, but not one of the best commentaries, that's for sure. Anyway, I will have to go. I'm coming up to an hour for this. Take care, BookTube. I'll see you next time.